Hi there, everyone. We're going to be talking about the spring flooding potential in the Red River in the North Valley up in North Dakota. So, you guys may have heard that there's a significantly elevated chance for spring flooding along the Red River in the North along its entire length. And that's primarily because we've had a very harsh winter. There's a very deep snowpack in the area. And I'll try to make this as short as I can so I don't ramble on too long. But the flood outlook was updated today. Today's March 7th, 2019. And yeah, there's a very high probability for spring flooding along the entire length of the Red River. This here is the probability of, it says, greater than 50% chance of exceeding river flood levels during the March, April, May timeframe along the Red River Basin. Now you can see the Red River main stem is right here. It forms the border between North Dakota and Minnesota. And while I'm not from this area, this river definitely has my attention. I've studied it many times in its past floods because it's particularly interesting to me. And you can see that nearly every gauge site along the main stem of the Red River, except for this gauge, I don't know how to pronounce the city name, Wahpeton, something like that, is less than 50% for major. And then at Hickson, it's less than 50% for major. And it's also less than 50% for major flooding at the... Oh, just kidding. Hallstatt gauge is actually above 50% for major. So really just the Wahpeton gauge and the Hickson gauges are currently less than 50% probability for major flooding. So let's take a look at our at Fargo, North Dakota, because this is a pretty popular spot. But Fargo, North Dakota is a very flood-prone area. Well, the entire Red River area is, because it's in a very flat landscape and the river goes north. So that makes flooding very likely in the springtime whenever you have above normal precipitation like we have been seeing. So here's the latest outlook. You can see that the potential for flooding has greatly increased, and at least at this Fargo location, it looks like that the crest for this spring flood season is expected to be early to mid-April. Maybe towards the second week of April is when we'll see the crest at Fargo. You can see there's a very high probability. It's basically when you have this dark blue shading and it's above the flood category, basically that means it's almost a certainty that it will go above the flood stage. You can see it's almost a certainty that it'll even reach the moderate flood stage. So the major flood stage is at 30 feet. You can see there's a pretty high chance of reaching the 30-foot major flood stage, and there's actually even potential to go higher than that. You can see the probability, the maximum height right now, so that's basically an exceedance probability of 10%, goes past 37.5 feet. So if it reached 37.5 feet, if you look at the historic crest at Fargo, 37.5 feet would fall under the top 5 in the Fargo area. Now we can look at the probability during the entire period, which tends to be more accurate. You can see that basically it's almost a certainty, because right here this means there's a greater than 98% probability of reaching the major flood stage, which is 30 feet. And then the probabilities get down as you go higher, as you would expect. So there's, for 32.5 feet, the probability of reaching or exceeding that stage is roughly 85%. So it looks like it's pretty likely that it's going to go well above the major category. And up to 35 feet, there's about a 50% probability. Yeah, about a 50% probability of reaching a stage of 35 feet for this flood. And above 30 feet, Fargo does begin putting up dikes. The sandbagging height, according to this flood impacts, sandbagging begins at 36 feet, and the probability of reaching 36 feet is somewhere between 40 and 50% based on the current conditions. For 37.5 feet, the probability is down to about 20%, maybe a little bit less. And then the probability of reaching record flooding which would be the height that we reached in 2009, which was 40.8 feet, it does look like it is going to stay below the 2009 height. So basically we are looking at, this is a very preliminary outlook because we're watching more snow events happening through the month of March, so these values could change. But right now, the probability is high that we'll reach a stage that is similar to heights that we saw like in 2006 or 1969 or maybe even 2010. So yeah, and that is pending the rest of March. We're kind of at the mercy of March right now. There's a significant snowstorm coming through the area that we have to keep an eye on. And there's actually could be multiple significant snowfalls over the next week or so that could significantly affect the water content that's in the Red River drainage basin. Okay, so let's go back. So that's Fargo. Let's look at the Grand Forks gauge. There's currently a 78% probability of the Grand Forks gauge reaching major flood stage, which is 46 feet. According to this, the Grand Forks gauge has reached major flood stage 8 times. There could be more times before the gauge was installed. So there's currently a 78% probability of reaching at least 46 feet, which would be in the top 8. So you can see here the flood crest is likely to be towards mid-April. This kind of reminds me of the time frame of the 1997 crest. Now I want to stress that currently we're not expecting nowhere near the height that we got in 1997, which at Grand Forks crested at 54.35. So we're not expecting, at least based on right now, we're not expecting that kind of flood. But we are expecting a major flood. And here's the probabilities at Grand Forks. So you can see it's pretty much a certainty that it'll reach at least the upper end of the moderate flood stage, which begins at 40 feet. There's about, like I said, a 78 to 80% chance of reaching 46 feet, which is major flood stage. The probability of reaching a height of about 50 feet right now is about 20 to 25% probability there. So 50 feet would be in the top 3 for sure. That would be around the height of the 2011 flood. The probability of reaching a record crest, of reaching the 1997 height, it's not high. It's not high at all. I just want to let you guys know that the probability of that happening is pretty low, but it's not 0. I would say the probability is about 7 to 8% that it will reach the 1997 height. And so the 5% probability flood is around 55 feet. So it's pretty unlikely. And then, of course, Grand Forks has some very hefty flood protection. So this would be well within the bounds of the levee and the flood wall height. So this would be a flood that would still be very manageable, but the river would be very, very high. And it is expected to get very, very high. So again, I just want to stress that the flood potential is very high along the Red River of the north. There's some communities that that either don't have permanent levees or something like that. Some communities may have to put up sandbags and emergency clay dikes and stuff like that. This is starting to look more and more like it's going to be one of those years that some communities will have to fight the flood. This is not looking like it's going to be on the scale of 1997 or 2009. The soil conditions across the area, across the Red River, let me zoom back out here. The soil conditions across the Red River are a little bit dry, but the thing that we're pretty concerned about is the fact that the frost depth is really, really deep. This area has been frequently dipping below 0 for well over a month now, and so the frost depth is several feet deep. So that means unless we have a very slow thaw, the soils, despite having some capacity to absorb absorb the runoff melt, um, likely will not absorb a whole lot of water. And like I said, the snow melt's going to have to be very, very slow for that water to be absorbed in the soil. But even if some of it's absorbed in the soil, there's still going to be quite a bit of runoff into the Red River, and so I think flooding is pretty much inevitable at this point. Um, I don't want to say that we're not going to hit record heights anywhere, or this is going to be another historic year, where we get close to our 97 and 2009 levels. I would say that it's more likely than not that we will fall short, which is good news. But we're gonna kind of have to keep watching what's happening in this area for the next few weeks. Because if we continue to get really heavy snow, that will obviously increase the water content, and of course, if we get heavy rain during the time of the thaw, that will further aggravate the flood problems that are currently forecast in this area. So you can see here okay, so this is pretty useful, and I'll post a link in the description here. This is the probability of exceeding a certain height at each location. So at Fargo, there's a 95% probability of exceeding a height of 31.1 feet. So, like I said, well above major. The 5% probability, so that's basically 5% means that's probably the maximum that we would ever expect from this thaw cycle. Is 39.1, which would be very high. At Grand Forks, the probability the probability is high to reach a stage of at least 44.5. 46.4 for the 75% level, and the 5% level maximum is 54.6, which would be just a little bit above 97. Hallstatt actually has the highest potential right now to reach a record. You can see there's about a 10% probability of reaching a record height, which is 39.8 feet, and a 5% at 40.3. So it's very unlikely, like I said, but these are things that we'll have to just keep watching over the next few weeks to see if this flood potential does go up or down. I know that we're probably going to remain frozen until the thaw cycle actually does hit. There's probably not going to be any periods where we get above freezing and melt a little bit off, and then it goes below freezing again. It looks like it's probably all going to melt at once, and the later you get into the season, like we are, the more likely it is for that melt to be really rapid and sustained. So, yeah, not looking too good in this area, and it's not looking good over the rest of the northern United States and down to the Mississippi River, and I'm going to make a separate video for that later. But this flood outlook will be updated, and like I said, there's going to be heavy snow into the Red River. There's under a winter storm watch where another several inches of snow is looking like it's going to fall, especially over the southern and central parts of the Red River. All right, thank you for watching.